With Jurassic World Dominion hitting theaters and acting as a subsequent end to the franchise at large, I decided that today would be a great time to review every Jurassic Park movie. But before we get into that, I would like to take the time to review two other pieces of screen media, as I'll say, related to the Jurassic Park franchise. One is a 4-season Netflix series that will be getting its 5th season sometime this year, and a short film that was meant to lead up to the newest film, Jurassic World Dominion. That short film is titled Battle at Big Rock. Battle at Big Rock centers around a family as they go on a camping trip, only to have it interrupted by a Nasutoceratops and an Allosaurus fighting each other. The film is meant to be shown as an incident of the dinosaurs invading the lives of humans on the mainland. And with all that extra stuff out of the way, the short film is pretty good. The film doesn't try to ask many deep questions or try to put a very mini and compelling story into this 10-12 minute short film. But for what it is, it does help to flesh out the world of the franchise and offers a thrilling 10 minutes. I give this film an 8 out of 10. And on that note, I think that this short film is very unique because it's that for a very big property. And the only thing that's really like it are the Marvel one-shots that pretty much stopped 9 years ago. I don't know why more studios don't do this with their big property. It can help flesh out a world, introduce new audiences to the franchise, and can allow stories to be told that would never have been able to be told in movies without there having to be many subplots or an underdeveloped story. The last thing that I'm going to talk about before I get into the 6 movies is the Netflix animated series Camp Cretaceous. Starting with season 1, Camp Cretaceous is a surprisingly well done, mature, and thrilling show. Season 1 is a season that focuses the most on the characters and is a very thrilling alternate look at what was happening on the day that Jurassic World fell. If I were to rate it out of 10, I would give Season 1 a 9 out of 10. Season 2, I think, is the worst season of the show. I find it immature and average compared to the other seasons of the show, since we don't spend as much time with the characters, developing them, and since the story is much weaker. I would give Season 2 an 8.2 out of 10. Picking back up with Season 3, I find this my favorite season of the show and the best one. It is the most thrilling and original season of the show. It has everything that I liked about Season 1 while doing something new. I give this season a 9.0 out of 10. The latest season, Season 4, I think is the most fun season. It introduces many sci-fi elements and takes the characters to a completely new location. I don't think it is as strong character and story-wise as Seasons 1 and 3, but I do think it is much better than Season 2. I give Season 4 an 8.6 out of 10. Overall, I would rate this show an 8.5 out of 10. Jurassic Park is the defining blockbuster of a generation, and for good reason. The film utilizes every aspect of a film that it can to create a bigger whole. Whether it's the score, the characters, or the scenes, this film has stayed iconic for almost 30 years. The film has resonant themes, well thought out and developed characters, a heart-wrenching story, scenes of true thrill, suspense, and a horror, along with groundbreaking special effects, a score that is still iconic to this day, and a sense of awe-inspiringness that razzled critics and still inspires audiences till this day. I give this near-perfect blockbuster a 9.8 out of 10. The Lost World Jurassic Park is a film that I and many others find very underrated. Sure, it doesn't seem to have as much to say as the original film. It doesn't seem to have the gravitas or inspire the awe and wonder that it did. It doesn't seem to have a clearly defined message like the original film does. It doesn't seem as complex or deep but on its own, I believe the film still works. Even if it has many plot holes, weaker characters, and is sometimes completely uninteresting, the film, in its own way, builds upon and explores many of the themes explored in the original Jurassic Park in a new way. The film seems to build on themes such as family, sacrifice, and corporate greed, even if this is done in a much sloppier manner than in the original, and even if the film kind of wanders and doesn't fully explore some of these ideas. The film has entertainment, which this time around it is meant to be more so than in the original. It does all these aspects well enough to both entertain you while having some substance behind it. And this film isn't all bad. At times it can capture some of the awe, wonder, and thrill of the original film. And I appreciate this film for being kind of risky and much different than the first, since that is something that we do not see much in Hollywood nowadays. So yeah, the film has its moments. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Jurassic Park 3 is definitely a underappreciated film. Sure, in many areas, most areas, it is very spotty. The pacing can feel rushed, the character moments can feel ingenuine, and the film lacks the awe-inspiring grace that the first two films had, which drew audiences in. The seeming sloppiness of this film when compared to the others really doesn't immerse the audience as well as the other two did, making it feel inferior. When you start to notice that some of the effects are bad, the characters aren't as compelling as they once were, and the story doesn't seem to make much sense, you start to become unimmersed. And, including me, start to see this film as less of an escape and more of a done movie trying to entertain me. And don't get me wrong, I find this film very entertaining, but it seems to lack the meaning that many other films in this franchise and the two previous films had. I love the Spinosaurus and the new Raptors and the adventure-esque tone that Joe Johnston brings to the project, but overall, I can't give this film much higher than a 5.6. Jurassic World seems to be one of those movies that was publicly adored when it first premiered, and now as people are starting to dissect it, the public starts to see it as not as great as they thought it once was. For me, I don't know what the heck they were thinking, because this movie is a fun, action-packed thrill ride. Many criticize this movie for the liberties that it takes with the Jurassic Park franchise, such as introducing hybrid dinosaurs and reviving the park years after the original one, and being a film about how corporate monopolization and exploitation is bad, even though that corporations use this movie to exploit audiences and the Jurassic Park franchise for money. Ironically, it became one of the top 10 highest grossing films ever made. This is what many people see as what is wrong with this film. A lack of originality, a cookie-cutter story, and characters that aren't nearly as great as in the original Jurassic Park. A not great film that only exists to exploit our nostalgia and make money. Contrary to those criticisms, I believe that this film works well enough on its own and is a surprisingly biting commentary on, yes, corporate greed. The film doesn't comment on corporate greed much the same way as the first, but updates it for a more modern situation. Intertwined with these themes that are represented by the Indominus Rex, we also get stellar action and scenes of true suspense. We also have characters such as Owen Grady and Claire Dearing, who go on character arcs on par with the first film. Overall, there's not too much more I can say. This is a really fun film. You can look at it as dumb if you want, or a little more clever than that, like I do. But whatever you think of it, I give this film an 8.7 out of 10. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is a film that I like a lot, but can't really say is all that good. Even though this film has great special effects, dino action is one of the most beautifully, or maybe the most beautifully shot film in the franchise, has scenes of true suspense, has an entertaining and fun story. For a lack of a better term, the film seems to lack substance in all other areas. The film has a lot of things to like and a lot of good ideas, and instead of letting its characters drive the story and these ideas, it lets these ideas drive its characters and plot. The film starts out launching plot point after plot point at you, and it doesn't give up until the end. And how it goes about this is very sloppy. The film also feels unbalanced, giving more time to some ideas and less to others, and also the pacing isn't great. With new additions of the Indoraptor, a clone girl, and a dinosaur auction ring all being introduced in this film, we sadly didn't have enough time to spend with our actual characters and develop them. Despite all of its flaws, I like this film, and I give it a 6 out of 10. While many others may disagree, I thought Jurassic World Dominion was a lot of fun and was not as deeply flawed as we are being told by the critics. Sure, the movie does go in a bunch of drastic and crazy directions that were not expected or anticipated with this film, like the world-trotting adventure plotline and the plotline where the evil corporation Biosyn schemes to wreak havoc on the world with genetically enhanced locusts. While I do partially agree with the criticism that these plotlines seem out of nowhere and absurd, and are such, I will go as far to say that these plotlines are fun, refreshing, and more entertaining than what many were expecting from this film, being a hunt for dinosaurs as a takeover of the Earth. The film overall throughout its runtime is always yearning to be as epic and thrilling as it can be, which means it takes some liberties with plot points, characters, and past events, and expects you to be ready to go along with its breakneck pacing and nonstop barrage of multi-million-dollar set pieces. I believe that in a sense this film does accomplish the epicness it was going for, since each of the set pieces is thrilling and has something that was never seen before in this franchise. I would also like to mention that this film does have solid character arcs, most of them being small for each of its main characters. Some of these arcs are resolved early in the film, while others span throughout the entire film. Most of all, despite what many others would say, this film does have deeper themes that make it more than just a billion-dollar cash grab and pretty compelling. The themes of family, doing the right thing, letting go of past regrets, and dominance are all resident in this film. Now, before I get to the end of my review of this film, and yes, I did have that written down as a fully fledged review, I would like to point out a few other things about this film. First of those things will be the action set pieces of this film, and boy, does this film have a lot. And I think it has the most out of any Jurassic Park film. The effects are great. The action is very visceral. It's basically Fast and Furious for Jurassic World, which would turn many people off, and at first it turned me off of this film, but I kind of went with it because it was a lot different than everything else we've seen in this franchise, and it's just freaking cool. But at times in this film, I feel like the quantity of these set pieces overlap the quality of them. Sometimes they feel artificial and unnecessary in the film. I would also like to point out that some of the sequences in these action set pieces, in these action moments, are very intricately directed, and I'm glad to see it from this film. It's a lot different than what we were getting from the last two. Also, in the beginning of the film, there are sequences where we follow a few species of dinosaurs just doing normal things, and the effects are beautiful, and so are the shots. I think this film is tied with Fallen Kingdom for the most beautifully shot film in the entire franchise. And seeing the dinosaurs adapt to our world and live in it as if it was their own, and seeing Blue, the raptor's baby Beta, grow up is a fascinating thing to see, and was very nice to see in the film. But we don't get that close with the dinosaurs throughout the rest of the film. They're usually just used to create suspense, tension, and action. So like how they used Biosyn and Dogson, even though the plotline with the Locust was half-baked, and they pretty much completely wasted Dr. Wu. I also liked how the film balanced the old cast with the new cast by giving them each their own separate subplots and having them meet at the end and interact. Overall, even if this film can be bonkers stupid at times, and the reasons for certain things happening with the dinosaurs and other things don't make sense at other times, it still comes together as a wild, sometimes cheesy, and respectful finale to this franchise. I had a lot of fun with this film, and I give it a 9.1 out of 10.